Cunningham, the great American. Of course, Congressman Brad Wenstrup, 2nd Congressional District in Ohio, is in charge of finding the origins of COVID and the fallout therefrom. Head of the subcommittee, a medical doctor, as well as being U.S. Congressman for about 10 years. And Congressman Brad Wenstrup, welcome again to the Bill Cunningham Show. And before we get into the substance, I had a brief conversation with you a couple days ago, I think on Friday. And you said to me something to the effect, I can't believe how the liberal Democrats, the leftists, are acting. It's not the Democratic Party historically of Bill Clinton. It's not the Democratic Party of even Barack Hussein Obama. When Obama ran for office, he said gay marriage was wrong and the southern border needs to be locked down. So I would ask you, before we get into Fauci and get into COVID and get into all these other issues, when you say things like, which I certainly support, what has happened to the Democrat Party? Give us some anecdotes and your feelings on that.
Yeah, what I see from just so many of them is that as long as they have power, everything is okay, and whatever it takes to keep that power. And so it seems to me that they've lost their way when it comes to the values and virtues that the United States always carried. I grew up and saw Watergate as a teenager, and you saw Republicans and Democrats alike just looking for the truth. And it seems that we've lost that. And people have, I think, in many ways, they may say they have a faith in God, but it doesn't seem like it. They seem to value other things rather than a higher being. And it seems that everything is about power for now. And I always ask people, when you're looking at legislation, et cetera, ask yourself, does it make Americans more free? And will the next generation say thank you? And if you see the things that have come out of the Democrat Party recently, certainly more debt is not something that the next generation is going to say thank you for. But also, so many of the bills and things that we see are just for personal gain, personal political gain, right here, right now, not voting for a better future for America. And I would also say, you talk about Bill Clinton, he used to talk about abortion and say, well, we'll make it legal, but let's make it rare. And now I see a party that celebrates abortion. They celebrate a culture of death, physician-assisted suicide. I mean, it's just bizarre, and things have changed dramatically in my lifetime. And I know there's a lot of old school Democrats that have left the ship. And there was a judge at one of our Republican dinners in the district not too long ago. He used to be a Democrat, and he said, they left me.
Yeah, I know we here in Ohio is going to have a vote on this essentially in November, and we're going to vote on an abortion bill far to the left of Roe versus Wade that has no trimesters in it. It's got the first 3 months, second, third. What it is abortion on demand up through including birth, and also it provides transgender rights where parents for a 14-year-old girl or boy has no say in what's happening, hormonal treatments. But the abortion extremism is something the media does not talk about. I had on a couple weeks ago a woman from Minnesota, which is not a purple state anymore, as you know. It's a deep blue state. And Keith Ellison is the attorney general. And there's more abortions now in Minnesota after Dobbs than before, because it's much easier and more liberal. And Keith Ellison, the AG, is going after pregnancy crisis centers put in by the pro-life crowd to show sonograms and also to show support for women that are pregnant and by mistake, by their perspective. And so I guess before we get into Fauci and all, do you think... I thought Dobbs was a victory, and now I'm not so sure if Ohioans, a middle-of-the-road red state, if we vote in November for abortion, partial birth abortion on demand, what does that say about us and about the nation?
Well, I think it speaks poorly of us as a nation. There's just a devaluation of life itself. And I bring that up a lot of times too, Bill, when we're talking about health and health care in Congress. I say, at what point are you going to put a value on the life? You talk about what this costs or that costs, but how about the value of somebody who's healthy? Can we look at some of those types of things? It's really not on the radar, but surprisingly, we did in a bipartisan fashion pass a bill called Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Nurse Visits that helped impoverished women to make sure that they had someone who's with them that could take them through their pregnancy, perinatal care, a safe home, and through the delivery. And this program's working, and we modified it so that the states have some skin in the game. We were able to pass that, and then weeks later, only weeks later, we put a resolution on the floor to condemn violence against pregnancy centers, which essentially are trying to do the same thing, aid pregnant women, and Democrats voted against it. They voted against a resolution against violence towards pregnancy centers. I don't get it, Bill. It is just amazing to me, but I sit on the floor, and you can have the debate, I guess, if you want, about what is a right, but real freedom consists in doing what you ought to do, not what you just have the right to do. But they're actually celebrating abortions now. They're not just celebrating the right to have an abortion, they celebrate the actual abortion. I wonder if they celebrate their own birthdays because they're denying other people theirs.
It's a culture of death, and I look at the southern border, which is essentially wide open. We're the #1 country in the world for the sex trafficking of children. The Sound of Freedom, which is a very popular movie. And the reason that happens, which didn't happen when Trump was in office, is because we have wide open southern border. We're #1 in the sex trafficking of children. We're #1 in the world in fentanyl abuse. We're #1 in the world in suicide. #1 in the world in drug addiction. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, you said a few minutes ago, what are we going to pass on to the next generation? And the answer is, if 2024 rolls around and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris retain power, I'd like to see a Jeopardy episode between Senator Fetterman and Joe Biden and Dianne Feinstein. I don't think anybody would buzz in for anything. But if they maintain power and they institutionalize wide open southern borders, sex trafficking of children, abortion on demand, fentanyl, and suicide, my God, are we in trouble?
It's exactly opposite of the society that our founders had in mind and put into place. And they've been working at it for years, and it's just grown more and more intense. And it's going to be tough to swallow. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep trying to promote the positives and all the things that America has to offer and the opportunities that are there. But something has changed. Something has changed over the years. And I don't know if it's just the breakdown of the family, a lack of faith, a less ambition to achieve by so many. But I think that actually the people that are promoting all these things now, like critical race theory and Black Lives Matter, they better take a look at themselves and see and look in the mirror and see if they're not guilty of the things they accuse other people of.
Congressman Brad Wenstrup, you're head of the subcommittee on COVID response and origins. On Friday, there was a headline, Senator Rand Paul, email shows Dr. Anthony Fauci sent a testimony, an absolute lie, files a criminal referral to the Department of Justice, which will be in the circular file. I don't see our President Attorney General, Merrick Garland, doing a damn thing about that. But it is what Senator Rand Paul of the great state of Kentucky says true, that there were lies told by Dr. Anthony Fauci resulting in the wrong public policies?
Well, what Dr. Fauci said, and we only know this because we've gotten some of his internal emails, what he said in those emails, he says, we know they're doing this gain-of-function type research in Wuhan. You can go back to 2012 in an interview where he said he was all for it. And even when he was confronted with the idea that a pandemic could be created if something got out of the lab, he said, I think the chance of that is minimal, and I think the benefits outweigh the risk. That was his opinion in 2012. So you know that he knew there was risk, and he also knows that this type of research was taking place. And certainly it was even published in 2015 with the U.S. and China. So why was this going on? So Rand Paul said, are you in any way, shape, or form, I believe he asked that in a hearing, are you funding this type of research? And he says, not now, not ever. But the NIH came out and later after that and said, yes, we were. Yes, we were. Well, who's at the NIH? Dr. Fauci. Who approves grants? Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Collins. They're the ones who approve these grants. So the timeline doesn't fit well for Dr. Fauci. And Senator Paul, I think, is on the right track in pursuing this. But I will tell you, since I've been on Intelligence Committee, especially when we were in the minority, we made a lot of criminal referrals to DOJ. Unfortunately, they have just sat. We need to shake things up, not only in the White House, but in the Department of Justice, in the FBI, and across the board in our agencies where we have now been able to see time and time again, they have arrogant authority where they write a paper and, for example, these scientists come out, write a paper and say the COVID came from nature, when silently and quietly amongst themselves, they're saying that we still think it may have come from the lab. And their words are being found. And so they're in a little bit of hot water right now, I would say.
And Congressman Wenstrup, as far as the American taxpayer funding the creation of COVID-19, similar to the communist way of making a family pay for the bullet to kill a loved one, that has not metastasized in the mainstream media at all. It's in conservative media. It's factually accurate that Dr. Anthony Fauci, directly and indirectly to do academic research, gain of function, actually took American taxpayers' dollars to pay for the creation of COVID-19. Why is that not a huge story?
It should be a very huge story, and it's also frustrating on the subcommittee as I watch the Democrats try to defend what has been taking place or what had already taken place amongst these scientists within our government. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Collins saying right after they said this thing looks engineered and looks like it came from the lab, I want you to write a paper. And a few days later, they're saying it came from nature. What is the motive for that?
Yes.
And COVID should have united this country. Instead, it divided us. So why are Democrats so quick to defend these people? It isn't necessarily Joe Biden in this case. He's got other things to worry about. But at the same time, they said, why are you defending these people within these agencies? I actually got a letter from the ranking member, Dr. Ruiz, where he said we shouldn't be attacking Fauci and Collins. Basically, we're not attacking them except to say, why did you dismiss the lab leak theory? But also, we're investigating them, which is our responsibility in Congress, which is one of the tenets of this committee, and we're finding out all the mischief that has taken place. Dr. Morens, who worked for Fauci, he wrote in his notes, write me on my Gmail because they're requesting my emails all the time, and I'm putting it nicely compared to how he said it. And now he's under investigation. He even said, and I'll delete anything I don't want in the New York Times. Well, that doesn't really look honest, does it? But for some reason, the Democrats are more than happy to just ignore all these things that they're finding. And they rarely stay on topic in our hearings. They just go off, talk about Donald Trump, and not stick to the topic of the day. And our last discussion this past week was on the mandates and the negative effects of the mandates on our country and on people. And the title of the hearing was Because I Said So. And that's really what it came down to, is you had a government saying, you get this or you're fired from your job, and you cannot believe the hardship that has put on so many people. And we had people from the military testify. We had a guy who worked for ESPN, and she was trying to get pregnant, was advised not to get the vaccine. Not only did she lose her job, she lost her health care altogether. Fortunately, she has landed another job. It's just really amazing. And you had a very left Democrat reveal the studies he has done and how much harm it has done to America across the board by issuing a mandate. Americans don't do well with because I told you so. They want to be educated, not indoctrinated, and interfering with the doctor-patient relationship by a politician and by the government is uncalled for, unnecessary, damaging to medicine, and I hope we put a stop to it across the board.
It's my view, and I think it's certainly accurate, that the U.S. government and Dr. Anthony Fauci is one of the saints of the Democratic Party, and the idea that we paid for the creation of the virus that killed 7 to 10 million people could not be admitted to by the federal government. They had to blame a bat in a cave in China or a wet market. We couldn't blame Wuhan lab itself because the American taxpayer provided the money to create COVID-19. And early on, Fauci and Collins knew that was the truth, but they had allies in the media that would go to a wet market or go to a bat cave and take a whole bunch of video and convince people it came out of a wet market when the federal government, led by Anthony Fauci and Dr. Collins, both knew 9 or 10 years ago that COVID-19 was a possible creation of gain-of-function research. And when it happened in 2019, they could not admit to the fact that we did this. They had to create lies to cover the truth. And Dr. Wenstrup, Congressman, we got to run up against the clock. I love it when you come on because you speak reasonable. It makes sense. You're the chair of the subcommittee, and the truth will set us free. At this place, we're still enslaved. But
thanks for the opportunity to share the truth with you, Bill.
God bless you. Thank you.